Welcome into the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. You knew that because you're smart. And it's also the name of the show. It's a great day. It's a great day to be alive. It's a great day to be a Philadelphia sports fan, potentially. Depending on which team you like, depending on which teams you follow, this is either a very good day, this is a great day, or there's a certain cloud looming over top of you. Now, if you are a Phillies fan, you're feeling very good today after a Cody Clemens walk-off that scored Bryce Harper, who couldn't be bothered to run out a ball that hit off the right field wall, which we might get to later on in the show. But just in case we don't, I've been telling you people, there's something up a little bit with Bryce, just a little bit. But if you're a Phillies fan, you're feeling great today. If you're an Eagles fan, you are undoubtedly still riding a high of a big win last Friday, which we will get into. But if you're only a Philadelphia Flyers fan, well, I got some news for you. It ain't all rainbows and smiles. I would actually encourage you, if you're only a Philadelphia Flyers fan, it might be time to also add one of the other Philly teams or potentially add another team altogether to your rotation because there's some weird stuff going on. And it has to do with two goalies. I mean, one that's really no longer affiliated with the organization. And then there's one that apparently just doesn't want to be with the organization. We're going to talk about those later. We'll lead with some Eagles here, but we are most definitely getting into Carter Hart apparently trying to get back into these United States of America. Alexei Kolosov couldn't get the hell out of here fast enough, is apparently training with Dinamo Minsk. So if you're a Flyers fan, I got news for you. We got some stuff to talk about today. I will also tell you. Now, I know that I've made this promise before. I know I put this on into the universe before where I've said, hey, you know that Snow the Goalie podcast, the Only Flyers podcast, it's going to be back this week. I've said that a few times now. I can tell you definitively that we will be back this week with an episode of some sort. And we have already scheduled, we have a big interview thing, roundtable-ish thing that will get released either this week or next week with some people that may or may not have some semblance of an idea of what the hell is going on with the team. Consider that a teaser. But Snow the Goalie, we're coming back. We're coming back with a vengeance. We've taken a hibernation. It was really the month of August was hibernation. And now we're going to get back into the grind of what will be a bad season, but might have a few bright spots. But anyway, we'll talk about Carter Hart. We'll talk about Alexei Kolosov later on in the show. We're going to start with the Eagles. And before we even go any further, I feel like the nice thing to do here is to go out to the commenters, especially to the people who are so absolutely wonderful that they go out of their way to make sure that they're here on time, even if I'm not. Now, in fairness, I will say, and I know that I shouldn't blame my wife, but I will blame my wife for this. She moved our espresso this morning. I got the kids back from the bus stop. I was like, it's coffee time. We've had our coffee pot down in the basement for a few days. I don't know why, but we have. So that's been down here, and none of the coffee's down here. So there's espresso upstairs. So, I'm up there. I'm trying to make myself an Americano before the show. I spent 4.5 minutes looking for the espresso. Where was it, you ask? It was on a kid's play table. Why was it there? No idea. If my wife checks out the show later, which she probably will, maybe, I'll have to make sure that she explains. I want to get a text randomly through the day that she went back and watched the beginning of the show. She could tell me why she put the espresso there. Not a great place to have espresso. I digress. Let's go out to the comments, of which there are many. A lot of great people. Great people. Ooh, tonight's the debate. We're not going to talk about the debate. Will I maybe fall into a Trump or a Kamala Harris impression a little bit today? It's entirely possible. Is the Trump one good? Yes. Is the Kamala one very good? Not exactly. I still have a little bit of time to work on that one. I'm afraid to roll that one out publicly yet because I feel like somebody's going to get offended if it's not very good. So we'll stick with Trump. But wait, will we? Anyway, let's go. Kevin at iRock Philly. Lots of Russes. I think this is just because I was running late, I think. Ford checked in, said the dude's making a 64-ounce iced coffee, then finding some cartoon sweatshirt to put on. Let's go. It is a nice espresso in my duck mug, Quack, quack. That's not a duck. That is a duck. All right. Chris Freed says the NFL got paid bigly for having the game in that small Sao Paulo stadium. When the NFL returns to Brazil, as they will, the game needs to be in Rio instead of Sao Paulo. And by the way, if you're like, why didn't he say in Sao Paulo? A little language lesson of the day. O's on the end of many words in Portuguese have an oo sound. Huh? Do you know that? Did you know that? Now you know, because it's my super short show. All right. ML Krasuski says, did the kids miss the bus? They didn't. Those of you who are parents of small children, you know what happens, right? Like if the kid sleeps in, well, they go use the bathroom. They use the bathroom, you say, yo, it's time to go. We got to go. We got to run. Sometimes they're on time and sometimes they're not. They made it. We were good. Chris Freed asks, should the Phillies bring in John Papelbon for a chat with Harper? I would, no, let's not do that. Let's not do that. Although I would love to see Bryce Harper not gawk at a ball that he thought was hit out for a home run. Take the extra bases, fella, especially in a tie game. One in which, by the way, well, I guess we'll touch on this quick. Johan Rojas makes an exceptional play out in center field, right? Practically robs a home run. It falls out of his glove. He's mortified. It's a great play. There are, I'm sure, people who are like, oh, I can't believe I have to be a major league player, and if it hits you in the glove. Hold on, it should be the nerdy voice. It should be like the drunk. I remember back in the 80s, they would have made that catch. He would have made that catch. It would have great. Well, drunk uncle, go to sleep. Sleep this one off. Rojas made an exceptional play, a very athletic play. Just didn't come down with the ball. Well, he did, and then it fell out of his glove, and he was mortified. But, with the chance to, get extra bases, Harper's watching the ball fly like it's a home run. He thinks it's a home run off the bat, and he only gets to first because he's gawking at it. Now, sure, if it's a moonshot, if it feels like it's going to be, a second deck special, by all means, Bryce, watch it, pal. Have fun. And I get the fact that, power-wise, it hasn't been there with Bryce for quite a while. And maybe it felt good. It felt like a monkey was getting lifted off his back. But, dude, come on. Every game matters. Every game from now until the end of the season matters, not just for the NL East, but for home field advantage in the National League. And he got bailed out. He got a few guys on base, and then obviously Clemens comes up and has another clutch hit. Great for him. Kevin at iRock Philly asks, what will get the higher rating in Philadelphia, the debate or Rays at Phillies? Oh, it's going to be the debate. Not even close. The debate on ABC. I have no idea what that's going to look like. We know sometimes I do the little thing at the very end. I do the thing where we delve into politics just a little bit at the end so the people who don't want to listen don't have to. I'm just saying, tonight's going to be a mess. I think it's going to be a mess. I have no idea how it's going to go. I have friends who are very far on the left and very far on the right and a few who are in the middle with me. And the people on this side are like, oh, this is going to be a massacre. Kamala's going to bait Trump into being a misogynist or a racist or something. Then the people on the right are like, Trump's going to kill her for all of her non-existent policies. And then I'm sitting here in the middle going, I just want everybody to have a nice night. I just want everybody to have a good time. I might make buff chick dip for it. I did the last debate, and that ended up living up to plenty of entertainment, for better or worse. We'll see how tonight goes. Reed DeFord calls the debate the 2-hour comedy special. We got Nico checking in with a what up. Andrew Fawcett with a good morning. Good morning to you as well. Ford saying sweatshirt. Yeah, had to take the kids out to the bus stop. A little bit chilly down here in the basement, Down here in the basement office, Hey. Andrew thinks I need a haircut. Andrew, I'm growing this out. I told my wife. Growing the lettuce out. We're going to see how long it gets before Ansan Philly's wedding. I have to look like an actual Rev Russ. I can't have a fresh cut. Well, it'll be fresh enough, but anyway, let's go back over. Jay Grebby with a good morning. Andrew Fawcett laughing at this comment about two goalies. Snow the Goalie. Remember that podcast? I got to tell you, if you haven't done so already, if you're a Snow the Goalie fan and you're upset that there hasn't been a show, that there wasn't one in August, I will encourage you that you can go out to send a request for a refund from intern Andrew. He's on Twitter, I believe, at Andrew_Henry5. Please submit your request for a refund and a reimbursement over there. Jay Grebby says, Harper not running out that ball. That's a technical foul. This goes back to a tweet from yesterday. 8 crazy nights for the Adam Sandler cartoon. Whitey Duvall, That's a technical foul. Possibly a homicide. All right, we'll keep going. Andrew Fawcett mentions that redacted Carter Hart wants to live in Nashville. Good luck, pal. We'll get back to that more. Sean C., there were more Buc-ee's memorabilia on yesterday's episode of Crossing Broad than episodes of Snow the Goalie this summer. That is accurate. Andrew says, Snow the Goalie in jeopardy because Russ can't officiate the wedding. I have an update there. Remind me around the hockey talk at the end of the show. I do actually have an idea of something there. Although maybe I shouldn't say it publicly in case it's wrong and then it invalidates the entire wedding. But for now, I think we're okay. I think. T from the TO3 checks in. Allison says Trump or Harris, both are corrupt assholes. Allison's gone full flamethrower this morning. Something tells me drop off for the kids this morning did not go particularly well for Allison, but thank you for checking in. And if you think they're both assholes, then I'll say they're both assholes. And if you think they're both great, I'll say they're both great. I don't know. We are a nonpartisan show here at the Russ Joy Show. We just think that everybody's full of shit anyway. All right. Let's see. Sean C. Well, this will kind of wrap up the Phillies sort of conversation we've had here, saying it's stupid that Harper's playing through these ailments, but now they have no choice but to play him because of Bohm and Real Muto are on the IL. I actually kind of disagree with this. I don't think they should be playing him through whatever ailments he has. I think we talked about this on last week's show. There was the wrist and the elbow, and he was playing through one since May, and then one kind of popped up more recently. I would rather have some semblance of a healthy Bryce Harper, because if Bryce Harper, let's just say conceptually, can't hit for power because of the wrist and the elbow issues, right? And there's a chance that if you put him on the IL, right, and he actually does rest up, that there's a chance he gets some of his power back. You have to do that if you're the Phillies. Bryce Harper as a power threat in the postseason is worth so much more to you than Bryce Harper going up and just being a guy who hits singles or maybe can hit a gap from time to time. If it's me, if you get to a point where you feel confident enough in where you're at in terms of going after home field advantage, I think you have to at least have the conversation as a team. Is it worth sitting him? You're 7 games up on the Mets. You're 8 games up on the Braves. We know that there's a Mets series to come. You don't want to have him sit and miss that series necessarily, especially given where Bohm and Real Muto are. But at the same time, I think that you are in an okay enough position that if you needed to sit him and try to get him healthy, yes, you might lose home field advantage to the Dodgers, who have an identical record, and the Brewers are 2 games back or so of the best record in the National League. I would rather have a healthy Bryce Harper, and you let the chips fall where they may. Andrew says he wants everybody to get I want everybody to get a trophy. Yes, I want the 2 people on the debate stage to get a trophy tonight. Give them both a trophy. We'll see how it goes. What does Trump call Stephanopoulos? George Slopinopoulos. We'll see if he gets a trophy. Will he get a trophy? We don't know. We don't know if he gets a trophy or not. But believe me, it's going to be fantastic, and we love it. Very great. So great. Allison asks when the wedding is for Ant. It's in a few weeks. It's in September. Okay, real quick. I know this is not the best way to start a show, but we have a lot to catch up on, me and all of you. The wedding is in a few weeks, and I don't have a wedding ceremony guide. I am not clergy, so I have to write the wedding ceremony, and that process may or may not have already begun. Emphasis on the not, but it will, because it needs to. I'm not actually worried about upsetting Ant, but I would be upset about upsetting Ant's fiance, soon-to-be wife, Maria. So I respect her too much to not take it seriously. So there will be a great wedding ceremony written. We will feel great about it. I told Bundy that we should do a press row show. I think it'd be hilarious. Pre-game press row show of the Anthony Sanfilippo wedding. I don't know how it could possibly go wrong. Let me know in the comments if you agree. And when we do snow the goalie, all of those of you who watch that show as well, let us know in the comments that you want a press row show. We'll get I don't know if Intern Andrew's at the wedding or not, but if Intern Andrew's not, we'll bring him in. He can do the video, and we can have a press row show. It'd be great. Jay Grubby also gave me the kudos there on the Whitey Duvall impression. It is sad because it was a Briere quote. I saw Charlie O'Connor and Alex Appleyard. They put out this thing about, I forget the name of the prospect. Sue me. It's not a hockey show necessarily entirely. The Flyers have a prospect who they figured out his feet are 2 different sizes. And so he's been skating with the same size skate on both feet, even though one of his feet is 2 sizes smaller. And the Flyers figured it out. And at rookie camp, they put him in the correct size skates. I know it seems crazy. It is kind of crazy. But they put him in the right size skates. And I was like, he's like Whitey Duvall from 8 Crazy Nights. It's like, what the hell does it's like adult size 7 right foot, children's size 13 left foot. And then he's kind of got a little hobble when he runs. Anyway, almost nobody's seen that movie. What good is it to have an impression for a movie that no one knows? I don't know. But this is my life. All right. One of these days, I'm just going to do an entire show as Whitey Duvall or as Trump or as Kermit the Frog or Bernie Sanders. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I have to start. Maybe some of these like default voices that I go to need to start just becoming these people. All right. Anyway, BJ says he's dragging this morning because of the Pearl Jam show. Can I tell you really quick? I don't ever know. I know no lyrics from Pearl Jam. I think they're the ones with the song Jeremy. I have no idea what the words are. I know it's Jeremy, but that's it. There's a song that Bill Simmons has at the start and at the end of his podcast, and I listen at 2.5 speed, so I have no idea what they're saying, but it makes it even crazier. Like, I still don't understand what the hell they're saying. All right, anyway, we're gonna keep going. J Toxic says, gonna be a great debate, probably the best debate ever. Some are saying. All right, we're gonna keep going. J Toxic also loves the Westchester Ram bobblehead on the desk. All right. And J Toxic says that I should use AI for the wedding ceremony. BJ says, Chat GPT, write me a wedding ceremony script. All right, that's actually not a bad idea. That's not a bad idea. I don't dislike that. Allison also wants there to be a press row show for the wedding. Interesting. All right. Let's go into some sports talk before we continue to go further and further off the rails this morning. Because as I said, it's a marvelous Monday. It's a great day. And if you're joining me live on the Russ Joy Show official account, I just want to thank you for being here. And if you're watching over on Instagram Live on my profile at Joy on Broad, I want to thank you. If you have a comment over there on Instagram Live, I can't pull it up on the screen, but I can read it. And I have a separate screen over here. So if there's something that just moves you, if you feel so moved by the spirit of the show that you want to say something, by all means, you can comment and I'll pull it up here. But if you're over on Facebook or on X or on YouTube, you're good to go. Jay Grebby also points out that it is, in fact, Tuesday, not Monday. That's how screwed up my head is right now. Yes, it is a terrific Tuesday. Okay. Ford is getting himself in his feelings about, is there a show or just reading comments? I love that Ford copied his own comment with the timestamps for the show. Anyway, terrific Tuesday. Let's get into it. So we talked very briefly about the Phillies in passing. We should all probably feel somewhat okay about the Phillies with only a few weeks left in the regular season as they prepare for a postseason run. The team that everyone really does care about now, is focused on now, is the team that everybody needs to kind of hone in on to some extent and try to figure out if we just saw real gold or fool's gold on Friday is the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, if you watch or listen to Crossing broadcast, I made some points yesterday. And if you didn't listen, well, then guess what? You're going to get some points, some old, some new. And they're all for you. But if you go back to Friday's game, and I actually went back to more of Friday's game last night. I went back and I watched a little bit more just to kind of refresh my memory for this beautiful Tuesday show. And, you know, my initial takeaway on Saquon Barkley was that he looked very strong. He looked arguably better than he has in a few years for the Giants. And so I went back and I watched some of the film of the game, right? And I thought to myself, like, is it just an optical illusion? Was it Barkley was only hitting open holes and that was it? Was Barkley unable to create chicken salad out of chicken shit? And I went back and I watched and I said, no, Barkley did exactly what you needed him to do. So let's have a little recap here of what happened on Friday. Saquon Barkley goes into his first game as a Philadelphia Eagle with the expectation that this could be the best season potentially of his career, that he would be lining up behind the absolute best offensive line of his career, that he'd be playing alongside or behind the best quarterback of his career. Is that Eli Manning slander? Might be. Is that Daniel Jones slander? It certainly is. Daniel Jones sucks. He's playing on a team that has arguably the best wideout duo, who, by the way, I think it's highly unlikely are going to get arrested prior to a game for speeding or whatever Tyreek Hill did. Also would like to venture a guess that neither of them will be accused down the line of beating their girlfriend or breaking their child's arm which for some reason has been part of this wonderful repackaging of Tyreek Hill as a human being, leaving the Chiefs and going to the Dolphins. Nobody really talks about that anymore. Yeah. I mean, allegedly, right? We throw out allegedly just to be safe. But a lot of people were feeling, good about Tyreek Hill as a Dolphin. But, domestic abuse is done, we'll just push that off to the side. Yeah, sure. Okay, fine. Yeah, mm-hmm. So Devontae Smith, AJ Brown on the outside could potentially free up Barkley. And one thing that I don't think anybody really knew was going into that Packers game, no one really knew how the Packers were going to attack the Eagles offense. You go back to the end of last season when things really started to fall apart for this team. It was the ability to shut down the passing game led to a backfield that had a decent enough issues. Now, DeAndre Swift was a good back. Nobody's going to try to make the case that DeAndre Swift was a bad running back. He wasn't. He had plenty of good performances for the team. Jalen Hurts' inability to actually get outside the pocket and run because he was hurt was a further complication. But you didn't necessarily have a 3-down back that you could hand it to each and every time and expect to pick up significant yardage. Then there were also questions, comments, and concerns about Nick Sirianni and Brian Johnson and about whether or not the game plan that was being installed and the plays that were actually being called were those of Brian Johnson, or if they were mostly from the mind of Nick Sirianni using Brian Johnson as a mere puppet, right? So you fast forward to this year. You go into the first game and you say, we need to keep an eye on Cam Jurgens. We need to figure out what is Cam Jurgens going to be? What percentage of Jason Kelce can Cam Jurgens bring to the lineup from day one? Now, you have to remember, Kelce scouted this guy. Kelce went out and decided that this is going to be the heir apparent at center for this team. And the early reviews are in, and they're very good. Now, nobody expected Cam Jurgens to go in and become 100% of the future potentially first ballot Hall of Famer in Jason Kelce. But what you saw out of Cam Jurgens was a guy who can still create holes to make advantageous situations for Saquon Barkley and other backs and coming out of the backfield. And when you go back and you watch, and I highlighted this on Monday's show, but if you go back and you watch the one touchdown where, and one of the big runs where you see Jurgens kind of bounce off the D tackle to the right, go back to his assignment on the left, it created a big enough hole. Barkley goes through. Now, I went back and I watched because, again, you kind of can become a prisoner of the moment. And when you're watching a game, there are times that you sit back and you wonder to yourself, is this guy really as explosive? Like, was he as explosive as it felt in the moment? Or is it just like that kind of new car smell? Is it, I watched Saquon Barkley burst through a hole in a way that I simply didn't expect him to at this point in his career. And it was just a cool moment. But like, if I go back and I watch it with, clear mind, open eyes, open heart, do I feel the same way? And I went back and I said, yeah, like the explosiveness is there. That's not fake. Like, that's not a fraudulent thing. That wasn't your mind playing a trick on you. Barkley looked that good. And then the other thing that I highlighted on Monday's show is I didn't expect Barkley to be a factor in the passing game. And it's not that DeAndre Swift wasn't good at it. And it's not that the Eagles have had bad backs, right? Like you can take this back a few years. It's just that like Barkley gave you something on that wheel route touchdown that I don't think anybody expected him to be able to do, where he goes up, skies up, brings the ball down in the back of the end zone or the side of the end zone and gets 1, 2, 3 feet down, right? That wasn't something I thought he was going to bring to the table. So you now have a guy who can run north-south. You have a guy who can go east-west in a way not entirely akin to what LaShawn McCoy did back in the day. But, like, there's some of that. There's the ability to bowl you over in the open field. There's the ability to get around a guy. We saw the explosiveness up the middle, and then you add in the potential element of being a guy who can go down, who can go into the end zone, pull down a ball, have the presence of mind, and also the body awareness to get the feet down in the back of the end zone. That is massive. I mean, that if you're a defensive coordinator and you come out of Friday's game and you're trying to game plan for the Eagles, this is now a holy shit moment for you. Now, if we're being fair, the area that you would think you might want to attack is where Mekhi Becton is, right? Because maybe the thought is the rest of this line has been locked in. Mailata and Johnson. You know what you're getting there, right? 4 of the 5 starters on the offensive line are back from last year. if there's one spot that you maybe attack, it's where there might not be quite as much cohesion and quite as much chemistry as Becton and Johnson learn how to play with each other. We will have a better idea going forward of what it's going to look like. But I have to think that if you're a defensive coordinator, that might be where you hone in. Go after the new guy who, even though he's a good lineman, you go after him because you pretty much expect that the rest of the line is going to gel. They know how to play together. And yes, there will probably be some stunts added in going into this next game this weekend to go after Cam Jurgens. But like, if there had been a hope in the league that Cam Jurgens was not going to be able to execute the tush push, that was already kind of put aside. Now, obviously, there are some people out there who might make the argument that like it wasn't as dominant of a tush push as it was with Lane John or with Jason Kelsey. I will simply point back to you that like conceptually, you got to like you have a line that knows how to execute the play. Jurgens knows how to execute the play. The first attempt was a little bit iffy. The second one was better. I made this point before, but like the Eagles and Packers were playing on ice, right? They were playing on a very slick surface where you can't get traction. When you have a guy like Jalen Hurts who can squat 500 and a guy like Saquon Barkley who can squat 600, and those guys have traction on actual football fields, that's going to change the game. It's going to change it in a massive way. So if you had any concerns, if you had any fear going into that game about what the line was going to look like, that was kind of put to rest. If you were worried about, can Devontae Smith continue to increase his production and be another safety blanket for Jalen Hurts, you got that answer as a resounding yes. Yes, he can be. If you ever had fear about like what, I don't think anybody did, but like, is A.J. Brown still going to be able to be a dominant receiver on the other side? Yeah, he can be. He didn't get as many opportunities, but he still had himself. He still made his presence felt. He still attracts a lot of gravity. And then you go to Barkley. Barkley changes everything. Like just fundamentally, Barkley changes everything from a defensive coordinator's perspective. It's no longer something like at the end of last season where it's like you shut down the wideouts and then you have a relatively immobile quarterback in Hurts last year and a non-dominant runner in Swift. All of a sudden you're able to shut down that passing game. It kind of kills the running game. In this case, you can't really hone in on anything. You can't focus in on killing the passing game because you have Barkley coming out of the backfield who can burn you in a whole bunch of different ways. You can't necessarily just shut down Barkley because if you put too much focus on the running game, you're going to get killed deep, whether it's Brown, whether it's Smith, whether it's Dotson. It could be even underneath for a nice big chunk yardage gain by Dallas Goedert. Like things have changed in a big way. Now I'm going to go over really quick to Instagram Live because I see Alex Longer 10 dropped a couple of comments over there. I can't pull them up on the screen, but we'll bring them up. Said, give Saquon the ball, getting over the wide receiver screens. I will point out, though, that there was a wideout screen where they went back-to-back plays to Devontae Smith, and they had like different amounts of success. With Smith, so much of it is like get him into open field, and he's very elusive. So like I don't actually hate that play. But I understand the idea. Like some people just want to see Saquon get to pound the rock 2-3 times, watch him go north-south, and then open up some potential abilities over the top. Maybe there's no safety help coming, and you get to exploit one of those one-on-ones on the outside with Brown or Smith. Totally get it. Let's go over to some of the questions, comments, and concerns here really quick. We'll see if there's anything of note. Andrew Fawcett says, Hurts is slow. He does look slower. He does. I am slightly concerned. I'm not very concerned. Could it be a scenario where Hurts realized that the turf was so bad and so slick that he realized if I don't have traction, there's a chance I blow my knee out again. There's a chance I get another actual injury here. My season's over. Or if my season's not over, like I'm going to miss time. Like, could that have gone into the calculus? Could that be why we didn't see him as mobile as you might expect him to be? I would certainly hope that that's the case. I just hope that it was him being overly conservative because he didn't want to run the risk of getting hurt. Ford says Jalen is good, not elite, and when everyone accepts that, it helps frame all his decisions. There were some concerns early in the game. There was the first interception that went over the middle into double, triple coverage. Not a great decision, not a great throw. Was it because he lost his footing? Was it because he had no preseason reps, which I do think is a legitimate thing? It also points and kind of makes the point, it proves why it's such bullshit to track the stats in training camp and think that that's going to be indicative of what you will see in the regular season. Jalen Hurts went up until the last day of camp without interception. First game, first drive, he throws an interception into double coverage. Not a great decision. Had a couple of turnovers in the game. Not his best effort. He and Cam Jurgens had that moment early in the game where there's a snap that goes, Hurts isn't expecting it, whacks off his shoulder pad, turnover. Not a great play. You know, the point has been made before. Because the Eagles starters didn't get reps in the preseason, the first quarter was essentially their preseason. It was a very abbreviated preseason, but it was still their preseason. Andrew Fawcett agrees with Ford, says he's a serviceable quarterback, isn't a passer. He's a scrambler, but his speed just isn't there. You know, the thing is, if Hurts is going to be a slower quarterback, like if this is permanent, right? Let's just say that it's not him trying to take care of himself on a slick field. Let's just assume that his speed is from now on going to be slower. They're going to have to break that mental block in his head that says, first read, get ready to run. First two, get ready to run. He's got to go through progressions and almost become more of a pocket passer. If the legs aren't going to be able to get him from point A to point B as quickly as they did as a rookie or as they were in the Super Bowl, he's got to fundamentally change how he plays the position. I hope that that's not the case, because if it is, it is a vastly different player we're talking about. Can Hurts be a pocket passer? Sure. In theory, that line gives him plenty of time. There are certainly points that can be made here about sometimes there's maybe the thought that Hurts is given too much time, and when he's given too much time, he doesn't make the appropriate read, and that's an actual concern. I don't want to take too much out of the Packers game and say that, like, you're absolutely doomed to the scenario where Hurts might have regressed last year and isn't going to get back to MVP runner-up form. I think it's way too early to say that. We need to get at least 5, 6, 7 games into the season after that epic collapse last year. Let's see what it looks like in week 7, week 8, week 9, and then make a determination from there of what he looks like. If he's fully healthy and his speed is what we saw on Friday, that to me is far from ideal. But again, Friday's game is very hard to actually have significant takeaways from. We have a few more takeaways, but we'll get there in a second. Ford says they signed him to tons of money because what else were they going to do? Don't tell me he's elite. He's not. He's far below Mahomes. Josh Allen is better. Joe Burrow is better. I could go on. A lot of people love Josh Allen. I think Josh Allen's a very good quarterback. A lot of people love Joe Burrow. I think Joe Burrow is a very good quarterback. They're not even remotely close to Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes is on an entirely different level. Like, you can't even begin to try to put somebody else remotely in the same tier as Patrick Mahomes. He is so far and above and away the best quarterback in football. It would almost be offensive to try to mention other names. Josh Allen's not that guy. Hasn't performed in the postseason, right? Hasn't gotten it done. Josh Allen has a lot of the same tendencies that Hurts does, in that he can use his legs and sometimes he gives up on a play too early. Josh Allen's a very good quarterback. If you told me, hey, the Eagles were going to trade Jalen Hurts for Josh Allen, would I be sad? No, because I would say you're getting very similar play. Now, is Josh Allen maybe a better pocket passer than Jalen Hurts? Maybe. It's possible. If you're going to try to make a case, right? If you really are going to try to go out of your way to say that Jalen Hurts isn't that good, you could try to make the case that he has a great offensive line in front of him. He has elite wideouts, right? He has a very good tight end underneath, and now he's got this absolute killer in the backfield. Anybody could succeed with that. Would Gardner Minshew be able to succeed with that? Would Baker Mayfield be able to succeed with that? I mean, you could maybe make that case. I don't know, right? That's the unfortunate part of reality, right? Like, we can't just plug and play these guys in. Would Deshaun Watson become it? No, Deshaun Watson would not be a good quarterback with this team. Absolutely not. Poor Cleveland fans. Poor Cleveland fans. Anyway, I think that when we all kind of just take a moment, you sit back, you say, if you're an Eagles fan, your hope has to be that Hurts bounces back from last year. You have to hope that the rust that he showed in the first quarter isn't going to carry through. I don't like some of the decisions into double and triple coverage. I totally understand conceptually that you say, I have these elite wideouts. I have a guy like Devontae Smith who can high point a ball. I have a guy like A.J. Brown who can high point a ball and also just destroy guys, like can out muscle guys for the ball. I get it. You got to give your receiver a legitimate chance. But if that's the case, it's got to be to the outside. Don't give the D-backs the chance to make a play on the ball. Put it where only your receiver can get it. That decision across the middle early in Friday's game was one that's like, it just can't happen. But he did settle in, and they did have a strong finish to the game. Now, the thing I was more interested in, and the thing I was more excited about, honestly, was the defense. Now, we'll just really quick. Andrew Fawcett also points out, Hurts has flaws, but at least they're not paying him $60 million a year. Yeah, that'd be Dak Prescott. Cowboys, $60 million. 4-year, $240 million contract. I feel like I'm the only person who doesn't hate Dak Prescott. I don't dislike Dak Prescott. I don't think Dak Prescott's a bad quarterback. I don't think he's elite. I don't think he's a bad quarterback. I'll take it a step further. Oh, this is okay. All the Eagles fans who are shitting on the Cowboys for giving that contract to Dak Prescott, if you popped Dak Prescott into this offense with the Eagles line, with Devontae Smith, with A.J. Brown, with Saquon Barkley, with Dallas Goedert, Dak Prescott is as good or maybe even better than Jalen Hurts. Let that one sink in. I think that Dak Prescott is a very good quarterback. He has a good line in front of him. They went back to the reanimated corpse of Ezekiel Elliott in the backfield. Tony Pollard is gone. CeeDee Lamb got re-signed. They're not going to find a ton of success this year. The Cowboys aren't going to win the Super Bowl. They're not going to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. They probably won't make the NFC Championship game. But I don't think Dak Prescott's a bad quarterback. And I think that ultimately Dallas was in a position where like there was no one better for them to go after. And they weren't going to tank a season in the hopes of getting a young QB. That's just not their thing. That's not Jerry Jones' thing. But just like in theory, like where they are as a team, $60 million is not exactly a great deal per year. That is crazy. All right. Let's see. CT Landry checks in over on Twitter, on X, and is calling out some of the negativity in the comments on YouTube about Jalen Hurts, saying the guy who was in the Super Bowl just 2 years ago, tough crowd. LOL. That's true. Let's see. Sean C. thinks that Hurts has the tendency to play hero ball, as seen in the Seattle game last year when he freestyles the last play. Hero ball is what got Wentz killed, or what Wentz got killed for. He never reined it in. We will see what this looks like. Like I said, give it 7 games. Give it 7 games before you either jump off the Hurts bandwagon or before you try to get yourself back on. Give it 7 games and let's see where he's at. Like I said last week, Friday's game could tell you a few things. It could show potential rust. It could show potential preparation. It could give you a better insight into what Vic Fangio's defense would look like and what Kellen Moore's offense would look like. Kellen Moore's offense has a ton of pre-snap motion. It is a much more enjoyable game to watch. It at least puts some wrinkles in the plan for defensive coordinators now that like it's not just a static lining up and then just running the play. There's actually some stuff going on that like in the moment defenses have to account for, that when one of the Eagles' dynamic weapons goes in motion before the play, that somebody's going with them. And that actually is potentially going to get Jalen Hurts in a position where now he gets to read the defense a little more. He gets to see what he thinks is going to happen. And maybe we get a more cerebral Jalen Hurts. Maybe we get a guy who does start to pick apart defenses. Maybe the way that Kellen Moore is going to continue to game plan and is going to play call for this team, maybe it is going to set Jalen Hurts up to go back to being that MVP runner-up guy. We will see. I don't know if it's going to happen, but it's possible. I'll take a lot more out of the next few games, again, when they're being played on actual, legitimate NFL fields, because the Sao Paulo stadium was not a real football stadium. It was football, but not football. Now, I will point out, for as enjoyable as Friday's game was, we are going to get one nice little storyline coming out of the next game on Monday night. because when the Eagles play the Falcons on Monday Night Football, none other than Bill Belichick will be in attendance. Now, why does Russ Joy highlight the fact that Bill Belichick is going to be in attendance? It's very simple. Bill Belichick wants to be the coach of the Eagles. Bill Belichick is going to actively monitor what happens in Philadelphia and what happens in Dallas. And we've been talking about it now for a few weeks, many weeks, some people. We've been talking about it for weeks. Bill Belichick didn't go take the Atlanta job or wasn't offered the Atlanta job because maybe he wanted to have some say in player personnel. We brought up the quotes on this show a few weeks ago. You can go back and check it out on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. But we had this entire thing as a group where we took a look at a clip from NBC Sports Boston, or whatever the hell that station's called. Is it NESN? That one. There was that. And then there was the clip from one of the ESPN senior reporters on a podcast saying that it was the combination of the two clips was that Belichick really respects Howie Roseman and that Belichick is actively monitoring what happens in Philly and Dallas. Because if you're Bill Belichick and you're the age that you are, you don't want to have to restart your entire career with a rookie quarterback. You want to go in and take over a team that's ready to win. Now, we can all laugh and make a joke about whether or not Dallas is actually ready to win and if they can be a team that competes. And it's entirely fair, by the way, to say no chance. But if you're Bill Belichick and you take that team over, they're going to all of a sudden become a threat because Bill Belichick is the greatest coach ever, probably, maybe, right? And if you're the Eagles, is Bill Belichick a better coach than Nick Sirianni? I think we can all say one would have to think so. So I expect Belichick to actually kind of have his eye on things. He's supposed to be on the Manning cast from inside the stadium. It's wild. We'll see. JH says it's because he's taking Nicky's job. Sirianni, man, what a shame. You win the first game, and then it started going around last week. I think it was on McAfee's show that Belichick will be in attendance on Monday Night Football. And listen, there are murmurs, right? There are some rumblings about Belichick being interested in the Eagles job. It's out there. Andrew Fawcett says, the Netflix documentary on the Patriots made me dislike Belichick more. I'll tell you what, for all the people who don't like Belichick, if things were to start falling apart this season, so the Eagles won the first game. It's a sloppy game. Jordan Love gets hurt at the very end. He doesn't get to finish the final drive, which could have gone either way. If the Eagles were to lose their next 4 or 4 out of 5 or something, could some alarm bells start to sound? Maybe. Do I think the Eagles at this point would make a coaching change in season? No. The only way I think it would happen is if they went out to a 1-8 start, then you have to have a conversation, right? I don't think they get to 1-4 and then Bill Belichick rides in here. I don't see that. But if this season does get away from them, or if it's a disappointing end, or they underachieve, I would fully expect you to hear Bill Belichick's name. Now, I will say, in the grand scheme of things, I think that Vic Fangio is going to be able to continue to improve this defense, which, as we talked about on Monday's show, they had some very solid linebacker play out of Nakobe Dean and Zach Bond. You have to feel good about that. The defensive backs looked pretty good. CJ, I think, is going to rebound, have an even better game. Slay was okay. Quinyon Mitchell had some good moments. We'll see what that looks like. And on the defensive line, Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis were both disruptive. And if those are the only two guys on the line who are disruptive, you're still in good shape. I think Vic Fangio is going to do wonders for this defense. I think we started to see some really positive signs of that against the Packers. On the offensive side of the ball, if Kellen Moore is able to, again, unlock the best in Jalen Hurts and unlock the best in Saquon Barkley, this season is going to be a resounding success. So while there's a part of me that loves the insanity and the potential chaos of a Bill Belichick taking over the Eagles, I just think that by virtue of the guys they hired to be the coordinators, I don't see it happening. But we'll monitor the situation. We're going to be doing the show no matter what. And so we'll see. Now I'm going to go over to the comments really quick, and then we're going to move on to some hacky tack on a Tuesday. JH says 1-8 would be too late. It'd have to be 1-4 or 1-5. I just don't see them making the coaching change, a head coaching change at that point. Like you said, Belichick is coming to win now, not a year from now or 2 years from now. I would be shocked the only reason that you make that coaching change, like you would almost need, if you started 1-5 and the Eagles fired Nick Sirianni, the only reason you do that is because there was almost an understanding with Belichick that, like, if it doesn't start off well, he's at the ready. Or it would have to be like Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio would essentially have to go to Howie Roseman and say, like, this guy ain't it. Like, this isn't it. You need somebody who can actually be a leader of men. Like, I don't know. It's kind of fun to think about the hypothetical. I just don't see it playing out. But again, we'll see. Now, other things that we'll see. Where do we start? Do we start with the guy who the Flyers own the rights to? The guy who decided to up and leave for Belarus again? Or do we start with the guy who used to start in net for the Flyers and is apparently trying to cross the border into the United States? Now, before you say the thing, because I saw a bunch of people tweeting about this yesterday, before you got out of your way to say, well, if Carter Hart wants to come into the United States, he should go to Mexico and he should come through the southern border. They'll give him health insurance. They'll give him an apartment in California, believe me. Before you go in that way, which some people did, there were a bunch of people on Twitter who were making that joke. I guess we could start with Carter Hart. Now, I will just, JH says, start with the Predator. He wants to be in Nashville. All of this is allegedly. We have now saved ourselves on liability. So the report came out that Carter Hart apparently wants to leave his home province of Alberta up there in Western Canada, and he wants to make his way to these United States of America. Now, that seemed kind of crazy because if you have any kind of working knowledge of how the law works, you would know that, like, the kind of crimes that he has been charged with in Canada when he was told to turn himself in to the authorities in London, Ontario, those aren't exactly crimes that you're allowed to just cross back into the U.S. with on your record. So it comes out that Carter Hart wanted to move from Alberta, not to New Jersey, not to Pennsylvania, not to this area, but that he wanted to move to Tennessee. Now, why does he want to move to Tennessee? Well, let's go to the actual report. It came from the Globe and Mail, which was the outlet that was really on top of the Carter Hart and the other players and the sexual assault allegations. They've been on this case since day one. So Carter Hart says that he has previously been denied re-entry into the U.S. because of pending criminal charges. So we'll go to the quote and we'll go to the blurb from this. And I would encourage people to go check out the full story because we like to support good journalism here at the Russ Joy Show. So Mr. Hart, a former Philadelphia Flyer, said he intends to move from his home province of Alberta, Tennessee, to Tennessee to work out full-time with a fellow former professional hockey player. And then he wrote, if I am required to attend the pretrial motions, whether in person or remotely, it would be impossible for me to maintain my daily training regimen. His affidavit says he also hired an immigration lawyer. He then goes on to say, I have been previously denied entry to the United States due to my criminal charge. And then through the court, the Crown did not oppose the applications. That was for Hart and for some of the other players that also wanted to leave Canada to go pursue other kinds of employment. When Justice Thomas granted the players permission to not attend the hearings, he said they all have legitimate grounds. So I just want to go back to like something in this because there's some fucking audacity here. Okay. So Carter Hart, the entitlement here is just wild. Now, everyone has the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. That is true. The accusations being made against Carter Hart aren't that he broke into a car. They're not that he embezzled money. They're not that he stole a couch from his neighbor's porch. It's not that he even went for a joyride in somebody's car. It's not that he resisted arrest. It's not that he led the police on a high-speed chase. It's that he, along with other players, sexually assaulted a young woman who allegedly was intoxicated, who allegedly did not have the ability to or did not provide consent. Okay? So, Carter Hart can kindly fuck off and miss me with this idea that him having to attend pretrial motions remotely would make it impossible for him to maintain his daily training regimen. Fuck off. Genuinely, fuck off. By the way, somebody just remind me really quickly. He lives in Alberta. That's in Canada. Hockey is popular in Canada. There are ice rinks in Canada. Hockey is the number one sport in Canada. There are many hockey players in Canada. But his excuse for getting out of having to attend any kind of a pretrial motion, whether in person or remotely, is because it'll mess with his daily training regimen, and that he wants to move to Tennessee, of all places, to go actively work out and to train with a former pro hockey player. That's why he needs to go. Fuck off, dude. Seriously. It is such an unbelievably entitled stance to take, and it is devoid of logic and reason. Let's try to be a little bit realistic. Why does Carter Hart not want to stay in Alberta? Because everybody fucking knows what he is charged with. Because everyone knows who he is. Because he has been charged with heinous crimes. That's why he doesn't want to stay in Alberta. Oh, well, why doesn't he just move somewhere else in Canada? Because guess what? Of the 5 guys that have had charges brought against them, he's the most recognizable. He's the biggest name. I believe he had the biggest contract in the NHL. He was a guy that was being marketed as a face of a franchise, of a team that, while they weren't exactly the most successful for the past decade, is still viewed as one of the most important teams nationally in the entire league. You don't just get to say, I was just thinking I want to move, from Alberta to Tennessee because I want to train with another player. Hey, you made millions of dollars. Move your buddy up to Alberta. What's the actual reason that you'd want to relocate to Tennessee? Maybe relocate to Nashville. What happens in Nashville? Just out of curiosity, what do people do in Nashville? Is Nashville a very quiet town? Is Nashville a town where only 1,000 people live? And that's assuming it's Nashville. Is that a small town where everybody knows everybody? Oh, no. Is that a big tourist? Is there a chance that if you go get lost in a town like Nashville, for example, that not a lot of people would recognize you because you've been out of the public light for a couple of years now, or for really about a year? By the time he maybe gets cleared, it'll be a year. Is it because while there's a very passionate hockey fan base in Nashville, for example, that it's still highly unlikely he would be noticed? Is it because there are tourists? Is it because there are a lot of girls who happen to come in from out of town? Is the dating pool potentially stronger in Nashville than it was somewhere in Alberta? I don't know. These are just questions that someone could hypothetically have. But I'm sorry, innocent until proven guilty. But if I'm a judge and I have to make the determination on whether I want to let one of these 5 guys out, given the high-profile nature of this case, given the potential cover-up that may or may not have been part of the entire investigation, I'm not letting these guys out. Why would you? If a plumber in Alberta had been accused of sexual assault with multiple other people, right? Had been part of an alleged gang attack on a young woman, would that plumber be able to go to the U.S. for contract work? Does anybody really believe that the judge would say, yeah, go ahead, go take a job working on a new skyscraper on the other side of Niagara Falls or something? I know that's Ontario, not Alberta. Stop with geography. Do I think that they would say, oh yeah, go ahead, go do some plumbing work for the skyscraper as a contractor? No, they wouldn't let you out. The only reason that they're having this conversation is that he's a pro hockey player, that he's got a big profile, and perhaps there's a fear of repercussions if they are targeting a high-profile player. But I'm sorry, you don't get to just go across the border into the U.S. with these kind of accusations against you. There is a reason that you have to apply for the ability to get back into this country, even though the alleged attack didn't happen here. Okay? You just don't get to do that. And you can miss me with this shit. It's not okay. I believe truly anybody who gets accused of whatever, there are charges. There are people that are ultimately cleared, that are proven innocent. There are people who are proven guilty. There are people that go to a plea. I will say that if these accusations are false and these guys are given the opportunity to clear their names and there is evidence provided that clears them, by all means, resume your hockey career. But if they're not cleared, if it's proven that these accusations are true, and you then allowed one of these guys to leave their home country to come to this one and potentially set up other potential instances of not great behavior, not that they will happen, not that the first incident did happen, but just in theory, allowing that person to leave one country to go to another and maybe go to a place that might not be the best choice, where somebody else could potentially become another potential victim. You don't do that. I don't understand what goes into the thought process of potentially letting this guy come back into the U.S. Now, the Canadian court, I don't know how this will work. I don't know if it comes down to the Canadian court saying we will give, the rubber stamp of approval on our side, but the U.S., you still have to appeal, and that's why there's the immigration attorney. And you're going to appeal to the U.S. But if you're the U.S., why let him in? Seriously, why? I mean, we can go back to, come back down a little bit. If you have a DUI in the U.S., Canada has the right to not let you into the country. Why do we know this? Because pro wrestling fan, there have been a few guys in the past who have had DUIs who haven't been able to show up at house shows or show up at TV tapings because of DUIs. They aren't necessarily required to let you into the country. If you have these kind of accusations against you, I don't know why you should be let back into this country. I don't get it. Somebody can try to make the case in the comments. And if you're listening to this after the fact in the podcast feed, you want to tweet at me, you want to DM me, whatever, by all means, you can let me know. You can make the case. And again, I will say that if he is innocent, if he is cleared, all of that, good on him. He can go out, he can resume his hockey career. He'll probably sue the NHL for lost wages, right? He'll make all his bank back and he'll still have a chance to resume the career. Now, I do think that for these 5 guys, their career in the NHL is probably over unless they are fully cleared and it's proven that all these accusations were 100% fabricated. They would need to super clear their names because otherwise it is a toxic, radioactive situation that I don't see an NHL team wanting to get involved with. That's just me. That's just where my head is at. I could be wrong, but I don't think in this case I am. I'm going to go over to the comments. Let's see if maybe I was being #heartless. Let's see what people are saying. Ford said, I don't know what this one was about. Let's see. JH says, can you blame him? I can't think of any hockey players in Alberta he can train with. They're everywhere. Andrew Fawcett says, Hart should learn how to operate heavy equipment, like for Menton, who actually is doing construction work, apparently. Which, I mean, he didn't have the millions and millions to fall back on like Hart did. So he's actually had to try to find a new career or something in the intermediary. Allison says, why would you think he would have knowledge about the law after what he participated in, allegedly? He's an idiot and an F-wad. Andrew seems to agree. Allison asks, is his statement supposed to invoke sympathy in us? Good God. Yeah, I mean, if we go back to this, right? It would be impossible for me to maintain my daily training regimen. That's like the douchiest thing. That is legitimately one of the douchiest things. And that's supposed to get the job done. My training regimen. Andrew says, entitlement is the perfect word. Isn't this how they all got involved in this mess? You have to go back and we're going to tread lightly on some of the accusations and how things may or may not have unfolded. Nico thinks that he should be in prison. JH says daily training like he's going to get picked up by a team. Allison says preach. We got some claps coming through. Chris Freed says was channeling Bundy, had to turn down the volume of the laptop. Sorry, Chris. Apologies. Andrew thinks that the guy's lonely, needs to find another pond to fish in. It's awful. I feel a little empathy or sympathy. I will go back to this really quick. This one by JH. Daily training like he's going to get picked up by a team. Here's what I thought was going to potentially happen. Okay. There was a rumor that had floated around that teams in the KHL might have been interested in going after any of these guys, even potentially Hart. Now this is going to be hard for many, if we remove the accusations for a second, if we remove the entire discussion around why he's not playing in the NHL right now, Carter Hart would be a massive upgrade at goalie for virtually any and every KHL team, right? He's a very good goalie. Do I think he was like a top 5, top 10? No. But would he go to the KHL and find a ton of success? Yes. Would he get paid considerable amounts of money? Yes. I'm a little bit surprised that there wasn't more traction to him trying to apply to go to Russia to play in the KHL for like a year or so until the legal process plays out in Canada. Because all the reporting to this point has been that if this were to go to trial, it wouldn't be until sometime next year. So he's not going to be playing in the NHL this upcoming season. Unlikely he plays in the NHL the following season. You would think that like you might want to go to the KHL and make more money there than you would make anywhere else. And that hasn't happened. Like that part hasn't existed. There was a very brief rumor, and I think it was mostly like just a fake report. I'm a little bit surprised it didn't happen, but that almost tells you more than anything else, right? Like none of these guys, including Hart, have apparently been approached with a good enough offer, or there hasn't been any traction to the notion of any of them going abroad to play. And you know what? Maybe they aren't going to do it because a judge would look at that and say, why would you be allowed to continue the career that you have right now? I don't know. Philly fan says, love living in the guilty until proven innocent world. Like I said, if he's innocent, he'll get to clear his name. He'll get to do what he needs to do. And he'll get to sue the league for costing him wages. He'll get to sue the league for slander or libel or whatever. He'll get to sue the police department. Maybe like, I don't know who he's going to sue, but he'll get to. If his name is cleared, he could potentially take legal action. And again, if he's innocent, if these other guys are innocent, by all means, they can use the legal system, just like how this, the victim in this case is trying to use it on her end. Reed DeFord says that it's more likely that he'd be a flight risk if he goes to Russia and would not come back. While I understand the line of thinking, he's still a young guy. If he believes he's innocent, or if he is innocent, do you want the optics of moving to Russia and not coming back? Like, probably not. The reason that, like, in theory, you would want to move to Tennessee, maybe to Nashville, is because you still get to live like a young guy, even though you have these horrible allegations and these horrible charges against you. You're going to go to a place where nobody knows who you are, or very few people will recognize you. I don't know. HD says that Dylan Dubé is playing in the KHL. I didn't realize that. Well, if he is, then that's very interesting. Then I'm actually even more intrigued in why Hart hasn't done anything. I can't imagine that Hart's agent is telling him there's a chance you go back to the NHL this year. Remember, these guys weren't issued qualifying offers, so Hart is technically a free agent. He's not part of the Flyers organization anymore. They don't own his rights. Like, that's it. It's all done. I can't fathom right now a scenario where it makes sense for Hart to make the case that he did to try to come stateside. If you're the judge, well, when the judge renders a verdict on this, like when the judge makes a determination on if he can relocate, and if the U.S. Immigration Office allows him to come back into the country, it'll be very interesting. And I'm sure that it'll start going around social media. Somebody will find him wherever he is in Tennessee or whatever. And you will start to see videos on TikTok, on Instagram. And there are going to be people watching this guy. There is no doubt. We'll see what happens. Final thing on today's show. It's been a long show. This won't be super long, but it is interesting. A report came out that Alexei Kolosov does not intend on arriving to Flyers training camp. He has no interest or desire in attending camp, which is obviously a concern in its own way. So the belief right now, the working intel, and I think it was Anthony DeMarco who put it out. Let me just double check because I like to cite the sources here. Anthony DeMarco put out on Twitter that while it's not officially confirmed here, let's pull this up on this here screen. DeMarco's report says the following. While it's not officially confirmed, the expectation is Alexei Kolosov will not be reporting to Flyers training camp. In the event of this assumption, the assumption is that the contract will be tolled, similar to Ivan Fedotov's deal 2 years ago. Now, if you're wondering what that means, you go back to when Fedotov signed his contract with the Flyers, then got sent to do his mandatory military service. His mandatory military service took a year. Because the Flyers had technically signed him to a deal or whatever, they essentially like punted the contract a year, like they punted having his rights for another year. The IIHF like upheld the validity of the deal or whatever, right? And so if the Flyers wanted to bring him over, they wouldn't have to sign him to a new contract, which is how last year when he came over at the end of the year, they still technically owned his rights. Then they signed him to a multi-year contract because last year when he played to start in the KHL, that started the clock. They told it for the year that he was doing military service. Last season was technically the start of the contract. They couldn't toll it for more than 1 year. And so he ended up playing out most of the year with the KHL. And then he came over and he played the end of the Flyers season. They still had his rights. And we'll go to Frank Saravalli next. So Saravalli quote tweets this and says, with training camp opening in 9 days, Flyers aren't expecting Kolosov to report. The best option for the team may well be to toll the contract, which would allow them to retain his rights at the same pay and details as currently under contract. So here's the problem, right? So if you're the Flyers, I think we've all kind of had an idea of this being a potential outcome. The Flyers don't want to loan him out. So tolling versus loaning is this. He signed to an ELC. He took the money up front. If Kolosov wants to get loaned back to Dinamo Minsk, that will take a year of his ELC, and it will count against the Flyers and against his contract. You're essentially at that point saying the Flyers are paying Kolosov to go play for a team in Belarus. Versus tolling the contract, it doesn't count against the term of the agreement. It just punts it a year. So, like, could Kolosov do this, like, douchey move where he forces his way back to playing for Dinamo Minsk? Yes. If he wants any shot of being an NHL player, however, it's going to punt it at least a year, because if the Flyers told the contract instead of loaning him out, they will still maintain his rights for that entire year. It just moves by a calendar year. He can't then just like come back over here and say, haha, I am now a free agent. I shall go wherever I want. That's not how this is going to work. The Flyers have no intention of loaning him out. They want him here. He truly, I mean, if the goal is to be an NHL player, right, which for a lot of these guys should be the goal, he should be over here at camp. He should be the starter in Lehigh Valley or competing for the backup spot with Ivan Fedotov. And I totally get that Fedotov was signed to a multi-million-dollar contract shortly after he arrived in the U.S. And, you know, they needed to kind of bang out that deal. I guess it was in the very beginning of the offseason. But, like, they signed him to that deal. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be married to Ivan Fedotov as their backup. If Kolosov plays really well in camp and plays really well in the preseason, you never know what's going to happen. And again, this is going to be a bad team. At the very least, he should be, especially at his age, okay with the idea of coming over, playing in the AHL, being the every night starter, and potentially working his way into the rotation at the NHL level. Fedotov's not like 22. Like, he's at a point in his career where, like, this contract that he gets from the Flyers isn't going to be the only contract he'll get in the NHL, unless he's really bad. But, like, this isn't a long-term competition with Fedotov. Sam Ersson is a really good goalie, but, like, if you're Kolosov and you believe in your abilities, maybe you feel like you can outplay Sam Ersson and become the number one goalie on this team. To not even try, to take your stick and go home is such a bitch move. I don't know what the guy is doing. I don't know what the thought process is. I've hypothesized on this show. I've had no one reach out from the Flyers before to tell me that it is inherently wrong. I do still think that, like, going back to last year, he thought he was going to be the backup on this team, that he might have to go to Lehigh Valley for a little bit, and then he was going to, like, get the call up at the end of last season, and he thought he was going to be the backup, and they were going to send Cal Peterson down. Fedotov coming over, all right, it totally threw everything off, and Fedotov got to leapfrog him and already had some starts even before Kolosov's visa came in at the end of last year. Kolosov comes over, nobody speaks Russian, or very few people speak Russian around the team, and he ends up having a backup Cal Peterson in the playoffs, which also has to feel like it sucks, right? So I'm not saying that the Flyers are without fault here, right? Like, if it were me, I think I probably would have said it's more important to us to get Kolosov some actual starts down the stretch in the regular season in the AHL, potentially let him get some playoff starts, potentially let him get a start or two at the NHL level. There's no downside to it. They were kind of hamstrung just because of the emergency goalie rule and with what happened with Hart. They couldn't have exactly, there was like the emergency goalie flip-flop that they were able to do for Fedotov and Kolosov late in the season. The idea, though, should have been to, like, get him over here and have him playing games, and he didn't. So I can understand the frustration, but, like, what exactly is the end game here if you're Kolosov and his coach or and his agent? You're like, if you do what's essentially like a hostile refusal to return to work, you're going to piss off the organization that maintains your client's rights. So I don't totally understand what the thought process is. And no one's been able to put it together. Now, there have been some murmurs that apparently Kolosov, he's a goalie. Goalies can be a little bit weird. They can be a little bit irrational. They can be a little bit tough to handle, tough to deal with. And maybe that's the case. And he's a young goalie, and he came over here and nobody spoke the language, or very few did. And, like, maybe he was just uncomfortable. But, man, you could have come into training camp. Fedotov is here. Mishkov is here. They have other people who are around the team who can speak Russian. Mishkov is learning English. Fedotov had already been working on learning English, did a good chunk of his introductory press conference in English. Like, there is a way for you to get more comfortable and to still be around the team, around the organization that has your rights. I don't know what this guy is doing. He's getting bad advice from his agent, if his agent is the one who's kind of pushing it. Philly fan says, the agent must think that resolution can be found before the end of the NHL season. So why get a KHL contract you might not get out of? The easy counter to this is KHL teams have been allowing or working out buyouts of players for them to then go stateside, including around the Flyers, right? I just don't know why, if you're the KHL, why you would be okay with Minsk allowing Kolosov to train with them. Now, if the idea here is that he's only training with Minsk to, like, get into shape and then hopefully force a trade to another NHL team, I don't see that happening either. The Flyers aren't required to do anything like that. Sean C says, Kolosov seems like he's shit out of luck. Minsk seems set and full in net when it comes to roster spots, and I still don't think they would risk crossing the IIHF, even though the KHL gave them the old one too. And also says it'll be who balks first, and I don't think the Flyers ever will. Yeah, it's interesting. I really don't know. Allison says that it's entitlement again, and says HC checks in and says by mid-November, early December, Kolosov will cave and come over. The problem is that he's, like, really putting himself in a bad position with the organization. I'll tell you this. The next time that I talk to a Dan Hilferty or to a Keith Jones or to a Danny Briere, I will certainly ask about Alexei Kolosov. And perhaps I will be doing that sooner than later. I have lots of questions. If you really want to be a super pessimist, you can look at this now and say that since since the Danny Briere began, since Danny Briere and Keith Jones have taken over as the heads of hockey ops, right? Cutter Gauthier decided that he didn't want to play here. Alexei Kolosov appears to be deciding that he doesn't want to play here. If you really want to be a pessimist, you can start to raise questions about how you lost your best stateside prospect in Gauthier and how you lost the guy that was viewed as the best goalie prospect in your system in Kolosov. Now, they haven't officially lost Kolosov yet, and things might still get worked out and figured out. But if you really want to take the pessimistic view, I think that there is a reason to be able to ask that question. I think that it's a totally valid question to ask. And until somebody comes out, whether it's the player, whether it's the agent, whether it's the team, somebody has to explain what changed between the end of last year, where Alexei Kolosov applied for a visa to come to the U.S., knowing that he would probably go to the AHL unless he was told that he would get backup games, and then the occasional start at the NHL. If he knew that and he applied for his visa at the end of last year, what changed in the few months from applying for the visa to now, where he actively seems to be avoiding Flyers training camp and seems to not want to be here? Something had to happen. What was it? We'll be diving into that maybe on Snow the Goalie soon, this week, and even beyond, because I have questions and I would like to have some answers. Because if I ask the questions and I get the answers, I give you the answers, and then we all feel good about it. Then we all feel a little bit more informed. All right, really quick, I'm going to let's see if there were any other questions. Kevin says, I wonder if Keith Jones watches the Russ Joy Show. I will tell you that I know that there are some people in the organization who do pay attention to all this stuff that I do, to any of the shows that I'm on, and they tend to, from time to time, maybe express a bit of concern or a question, or let's say, oh, that seems a little bit harsh. Now, there was somebody who actively, I think, was like plugged into any time there was a notification of my name anywhere and would immediately send me feedback and say that I was unfair to Dave Scott and Val Camilla, but that person no longer works for the team. We'll see how they feel. I'll clip this up too. I'll add extra eyeballs to this part of the show. I don't think that Briere and Jones are to blame, in fairness. I don't think they're to blame for Kolosov or probably for Gauthier. I just think you have two guys that for whatever reason are unhappy and it's just bad timing. But if things were ever to come out that it is their fault or that somebody really is to blame, we'll call those people onto the carpet. Let's see. Last thing. Sean C says, I think the Flyers front office is smart enough to see the reaction of the hardcores. Him coming over, whether it be tomorrow or around Christmas, will be a win for them. And then Philly fan says, Mishkov came over. None of the others matter. There you go. Danny says, Danny Longo checks in on YouTube, says, there you go. He listens to the show and changed his mind. Yeah, we'll see. It'd be nice to have Kolosov in camp. It'd be nice to actually have him stateside and be able to see how his game might translate to the NHL and to see him as the starter for the AHL, for the Phantoms, and actually have like a legitimate glimpse into what he can maybe be in net. We'll see what happens. Now, I will be back on Friday, and I know that the last 2 weeks I've said I'd be back on Friday, and then I didn't. It didn't happen. 2 Fridays ago was the Gaudreau tragedy. That was pretty simple. Last Friday, I went from saying, yes, going to do a show, to the realization that it was NFL Week 1 and my day job. I worked, I think, on Friday from 5:30 a.m. until 8:30 p.m. And then I was like, oh, maybe I'll do a post-game show after the Eagles game. As soon as the game was over, I fell asleep, so it didn't happen. But this Friday, I'll be back 8:30. You can find the show on YouTube live every Tuesday and Friday at 8:30 a.m. on the Russ Joy Show YouTube account. You can find it on the Joy Media account over on Facebook. You can find it on Instagram Live at Joy on Broad. You can find this wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts. Do me a favor if you haven't already. Leave a 5-star rating. That's always helpful. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review. I will read it on the show. Also, do me another favor. If you see part of the show live and then you go back to finish it later, leave a comment, because comments, for whatever reason, not just the live ones, but the ones after the fact in the actual comment section, when those are left on videos, apparently the algorithm likes it. And also smash that like button because they like that as well. Subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the podcast. I appreciate each and every one of you. And I want to thank you for joining me live or listening or watching after the fact in the podcast feed or on YouTube or wherever else. So I'll be back on Friday. A big thank you to all of you for checking out the Russ Joy Show with me, Russ Joy. I will talk to all of you this Friday. Have a good one, everybody.